Some of the most famous guitar players in history have become associated with just one type of guitar. Yet many of us, including myself, have become guitar-a-holics and we own several different models. So in this video I'm going to discuss the topic of can you get by and can a guitar player be happy just owning one guitar? Let's get into it. Hey everybody, Jamie Holroyd here helping you learn jazz guitar. Welcome to the channel. If you're new to the channel and you want a structured guide on learning jazz guitar, then please check out the links below to my free beginner jazz guitar ebook. Now, just to be clear from the get-go, I'm not against owning multiple guitars. Regular viewers of the channel will know that I own and use several different models, but I think it's a really fun experiment. Even if you have a few guitars, try playing one just for a couple of months, couple of weeks, and see what the others feel like after just playing one guitar for an extended amount of time. To start things off, I'd like to share a quote with you from the English jazz guitar player Terry Smith. These were his thoughts on owning multiple guitars. "I literally do not see the point. You wouldn't expect a saxophone player to have 12 different saxophones. When he's decided that he's got the right reed for the sound he wants, the right saxophone that he's comfortable with, even the right sling, then he's fine. Should be the same with guitarists." That's from Terry Smith from an interview that he did for Guitar Player magazine in 1974. Rewinding back to when I was 16, I actually did use and mostly had one guitar for about 3 to 5 years throughout college and university, which was this guitar right here. I'm sure that if you've watched this channel a few times, you'll have seen this Japanese strap before, and I actually had to sell my guitar that I had before this. I was around 15, 16, and I had an Epiphone SG and it had some problems, and the cost to repair the problems outweighed the cost of the guitar. So I decided to sell the guitar and get this because, at that point I decided to study music at college and university, and I wanted, a slightly higher level instrument to get me through. During that time, I put probably my 10,000 hours of practice on this. I used it for rehearsals, gigs, jam sessions. I used this guitar a lot, and I didn't have the luxury at that time to afford several different models, and it really did teach me a lot about playing the guitar and how much you can get from one guitar. For example, at that time I began getting into jazz, and obviously seeing pictures of all my jazz guitar heroes using arch tops, the initial thought was I need an arch top to get that sound, like I'm sure many of you go through, but I was forced to use this sound to manipulate how I play the instrument, use the tone and volume controls to get a good jazz sound, and all the other different styles that I was playing with, I had to try and get them out of this one guitar. Besides that, obviously, I got really used to it. When I first got this guitar, I actually didn't like it at all. Like I said, I used to have an SG before that. And when you play an SG or a Les Paul and you put that into an amp and you put some distortion, you kind of get a really fat sound from the get-go. The first time I plugged this into an amp with some distortion, and I didn't like it at all. And it took me a while to get used to it, to try and get the sounds that I want from it. And that is I think a good thing about owning one guitar. You're forced to really work with it to try and get what you want from it. The first pro to owning one guitar is that you get very used to it. You know exactly how that guitar neck feels, you get used to the sound of the pickups, how the tone and volume controls work, and you don't even have to think about getting used to it. You can just pick it up, begin playing it, and it's basically, as Barney Cassell said, like putting on a pair of old slippers, right? They're just comfortable, you know how they work, and that's a good thing about owning one guitar. You don't have to get used to playing several different models. This leads me to the second point, is that you begin to develop trust with that guitar, especially when you're using it in various different settings. So if you've ever played guitar with a band or at a gig or at a rehearsal, you'll know that the guitar can sound different in different rooms and with different ensembles. And for example, maybe if you've got a Fender guitar, if you play that in a big room with lots of natural reverb, maybe that can add some brightness to the sound that you're not particularly used to at home. So if you use one guitar in lots of different situations, then you'll really know how to use it. Whereas if you're using different guitars all the time, you might not trust them as much as just the one guitar that you can really rely upon. The third pro is that there are less maintenance costs when you only have one guitar. Obviously, you only have to restring one guitar, you only have to pay for a setup on one guitar. If there's anything wrong with the guitar, then it's going to be far less than having several guitars that you've got to restring, make sure they play well, refret. None of that's a concern at all when you just have one guitar. The last pro, which is probably the most important, is that if you've got one guitar that you like and you enjoy playing, then you're not going to be spending time on eBay or Reverb looking for other guitars, right? You're going to be spending all your time playing and practicing on that one guitar, not looking for other guitars. Let's now look at some potential cons to keep the argument balanced. The first is that you could get bored playing the same model. If you're playing the same guitar month in, month out, year in, year out, maybe you just want some different sounds. Maybe you feel like you've explored the sounds of one instrument in its entirety and you just want something fresh that will inspire you. I think that's a fairly valid point. The second reason is that different guitars can inspire you to play differently. Obviously, an acoustic guitar is going to produce different results from playing an electric guitar. A Les Paul is going to potentially make you play differently from a Strat. I think this is very much a player by player scenario. There are some famous guitar players who basically sound very similar on any guitar no matter what they play, and there are other players that have almost defined several instruments throughout their career. If you think of somebody like Mike Knopfler, then obviously he's basically pioneered some of the sounds of the Strat and the Les Paul. Same with Clapton. If you think of the 60s Clapton records, the Beano album, the 59 Les Paul, and then his Strat period, those basically helped shape periods of different guitar players' careers. So I think that might be a valid reason as well. If a different guitar inspires you to play differently and you use it and you need it, then I wouldn't see any problem personally. The last potential con is that you could have to compromise on certain sounds. So if you're a working musician and you have to use one guitar for several different situations, then if your only guitar is an archtop guitar, then that's probably not going to be preferential for a metal gig. So that could be a potential downside. Now, obviously, that's an extreme example. If you've got something like a PRS or a Tele or a Super Strat or something like that, then you could arguably do different styles of music on that one guitar. So that, I guess, is debatable. It depends really on your own situation. I'd now like to take a look at what I consider to be some myths for owning several different guitars. And believe me, I've definitely gone down this rabbit hole a few times, but after going down a rabbit hole and coming back out again, I really believe that some of these could be myths, so let's get into them. The first myth is having several guitars as a backup. Now, I understand that if you're in a situation where you can have a guitar as a backup, then that is a luxury, and depending upon the style that you play, that could be a very worthwhile thing. If you're bending a lot of strings and things like that and you've got space to have guitars as a backup, then that is a luxury that I'm sure you would take, because why wouldn't you? However, the reality for most musicians is that space is usually at a premium when you're travelling to gigs, especially long distance. If several musicians are sharing one car together, then you might not always have the space to take multiple guitars. And of course, if you are flying, you might be able to get away taking one guitar. Even that can be a bit of a faff, because you've got to sometimes take the neck off to put it in a suitcase, or you've got to take it on board with you or check it in. Doing that with two guitars creates a whole lot more problems, and it could be a lot more costly. And if you are doing this as a living, then you might try and only get by with one guitar. And there are a lot of professional musicians that only use one guitar. They only fly with one guitar. So if you think about it, that could perhaps be the ultimate test of needing more guitars. If you're playing live night after night and you can do it all with one guitar, and yeah, let's face it, strings could snap, these things could happen. But realistically, I suppose that depends on your style as well. Personally speaking, I've only broke one string at one gig one time, and ironically I did have a backup then, but since then, since switching to jazz and bending strings a lot less, I don't think I've ever taken a backup guitar to a gig ever. I've only used one guitar on lots of various different gigs, and I've never had a problem. I guess if you have one guitar and you keep it maintained, you change the strings and make sure everything's good, then in my opinion, it's highly unlikely that you're going to have a problem just taking one guitar to a gig. The next guitar myth is what if situations. And what I mean by a what if situation is buying a guitar for a situation that could arise rather than one that certainly has. So to tell you a story about this, a couple of years ago, I was doing a few dep gigs, playing at weddings, functions, playing the standard set list. And On this set list there was a few rockier tunes, and when I completed these gigs I thought, well, I would really like a Les Paul to play some of these songs with. So I went and got a Les Paul, and you can probably guess where this is going. I didn't do any more gigs with that band ever. I just basically had a Les Paul to play rock on, and then no more gigs ever emerged. So, you know, learning from that, say if those situations ever arise again, I would really wait until the situation calls for another instrument before buying it, rather than just buying it to have for a what if situation. So I think maybe a year or two after that, I got asked to do a solo jazz guitar gig, and I've done a few of those in the past. And on this particular solo gig, the client wanted some classical songs on a classical guitar. Now, I don't actually own a nylon string guitar, and I was really kind of blagging my way through some of these nylon guitar tunes, to be honest, but a friend of mine did, so I just went and borrowed a nylon guitar, played a few classical songs for the setlist on that guitar, no problem, and since then I've never needed one. So in my opinion, that would have been a bit of an inconvenience and a bit of a waste for me to go and have to buy a nylon string guitar for a one-off situation. So I try to, if I can, either borrow or loan a guitar if it's a one-off situation, but these rarely happen. The last myth is really just social pressure. I think as guitar players watching social media, you can feel like you need to have a Les Paul, you need to have a Strat, you need to have an acoustic, you need to have an archdub, you need to have this, you need to have that. It goes on and on and on. And that really is a myth for me personally, and that is one thing that I have actually stuck to in 20 years of playing guitar. So my confession is that I've never actually bought or owned a high quality acoustic guitar. The only acoustic guitar which I own is the very first one that my grandma bought me when I was 12 years old, and I've still got that for sentimental reasons. I think it cost about £150 at the time, not much money, and that is the only acoustic guitar that I've ever owned. Now, I'm not against owning acoustic guitars. Like I said before, if a situation arose where I needed a high quality acoustic guitar, then I would get one, but I don't feel the need or pressure as a professional guitar player to own a good quality acoustic guitar at the time of this recording. So if you've made it this far, you might be wondering, what one guitar would I choose if I only had to use and own one guitar? Well, let me ease myself into the question a little bit. The first thing I would do would try and get it down to 3 guitars, and if I could only own 3 guitars, then there would be the Telecaster, an electric archtop with humbuckers, and maybe a 330 as well. 3 guitars, I reckon I'd be very happy with those, and they'd all get played very regularly. If I could only have one guitar, then I'm sure most of you already know that would have to be a Telecaster, and for me, this covers all the criteria that I look for in just owning one guitar. So if I just owned one guitar, there are a few different things that I'd have to look for. One would be a guitar that has good quality pickups and good quality electronics, which this one does. This has got some nice pickups in, and it's got upgraded CTS pots and things like that, so that fits the first criteria. The second is that it would have to be easy to travel with. I need something that I can throw in a gig bag, throw in the back of a car, take on a plane, take the neck off. Of course, this easily does that for me. If you've got a bigger archtop or something like that, then they are nowhere near as transportable as what a Telecaster or even a Strat is. The third criteria is that the guitar would have to be lightweight and comfortable. This guitar is very lightweight, very resonant and very comfortable, so that definitely fits that criteria. I can play with this on my lap for hours or with the strap on and basically feel nothing whatsoever. It's a super comfortable guitar to play. In terms of my own personal preferences, it would have to be a neck that's not too thick, and it would have to have good frets that I can play without any problems whatsoever, and once again that guitar meets that criteria too. The last piece of criteria is something that's not too expensive. If I had to use one guitar all the time for everything that I do, I wouldn't want to take an expensive guitar to some of the smaller venues that I play in, and I wouldn't want to worry about that really. And if I've got a less expensive instrument, then none of that is a massive concern. Those are my thoughts on owning one guitar, but what I'd really like to know is, what do you think about owning one guitar? Could you do it? Are you going to challenge yourself to try and play one guitar for a couple of weeks? If you could only own one guitar, what would it be? Please share your thoughts in the comment section, and if you want more videos like this, then don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.